Hey everyone, welcome back to our chapter book read-along for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by JK Rowling. We are now on chapter 4. So let's do a quick review. So pause it and review with those who you're watching with. Or here goes my quick review. Harry Potter is a pretty special boy. He is a wizard, but he has even more special things with him, right? So we find out that his parents were killed by an evil wizard named Voldemort. He is left with his aunt and uncle, the Dursleys, and their son, Dudley. So they are not very nice people and are really just mean to him. He lives in a cupboard. He doesn't get anything of his own. He has to wear Dudley's old hand-me-downs. But one day, he does get to go to the zoo with them. So, what happens there is that Harry got upset. Dudley pushed him, and the glass in front of a boa constrictor suddenly vanished. And the boa constrictor came out, didn't do anything to Dudley, but scared him, right? So, what we find next is that Harry has a bunch of letters coming to him. It doesn't really say who they're from, and Harry's never gotten letters before, right? So, Uncle Vernon Dursley takes the letters from Harry and won't let him read them. But those letters were pretty pesky, weren't they? They refused to stop. They came in through the windows, through the chimneys, everywhere. So his uncle decided that they were going to go on a trip and hope that these letters wouldn't find them. They went all over the country to a hotel in the middle of nowhere and then finally stopped on a tiny little hut in the middle of a lake. And that's where we find our friends, which they hear a knock on the door in the middle of a storm. And we are about to see who's at that door. So here goes. Chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Vernon came skidding into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Now they knew what had been in that long, thin package he had brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause. Then, smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges with a deafening crash, landing flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. But you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head had just brushed the ceiling. He bent down, picked up the door, and fitted it easily back onto his frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could you? It's not an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa where Dudley had sat frozen in fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother, who was crouching terrified behind Uncle Vernon. "And there's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, you was only a baby," said the giant. "It looks a lot like your dad, but you got your mum's eyes." Uncle Vernon made a funny rasping noise. "I demand you leave here at once, sir," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Vernon's hands, bent it into a knot as easily as if it had been made of rubber, and threw it in the corner of the room. Uncle Vernon made another funny noise, like a mouse being trotted on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back to the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to you. Got summat for you right here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste all right." From the inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost in the way of his mouth, and he said instead, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I'd not say no to something stronger if you got it in mind." His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled crisp packets in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as though he'd sunk into a hot bath. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squashy package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chipped mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid, which he took a swig of from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Vernon said sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "Your great pudding of a son don't need fattening any more, Dursley. Don't worry." He passed the sausages to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful. But he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm a keeper of keys at Hogwarts. You know all about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry?" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them who should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't even know about Hogwarts for crying aloud. Did you never wonder where your parents learnt it all?" "Oh, what?" said Harry. "Oh, what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just a second." He had leapt to his feet. In his anger, he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled at the Dursleys, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was a bit far. He had been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things," he said. "I can, do maths and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world, I mean. Your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursley!" he boomed. Uncle Vernon, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like "Mimblewimble." Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mum and dad. I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mum and dad weren't famous, were they?" You don't know. Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know who you are?" he said finally. Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. "Stop!"
he commanded. "Stop right there, sir! I forbid you to tell this boy anything!"
A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage.
"You never told him? Never told him what was in that letter Dumbledore left for him? I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley. And you've kept it from him all these years?"
"Kept what from me?" said Harry eagerly.
"Stop! I forbid you!"
yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror.
"I'll go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard."
There was a silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard.
"I'm a what?"
gasped Harry.
"A wizard, of course,"
said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower.
"And a thumping good un, I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mum and dad like yours, what else would you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter."
Harry stretched out his hand at last to take the yellowish envelope, addressed in emerald green to Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. He pulled out the letter and read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class. Grand Sorcerer of Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederacy of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl no later than 31st July. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded inside of Harry's head like fireworks. He couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean they await my owl?"
"Galloping Gorgons, that reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping his hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse. And from yet another pocket inside his overcoat, he pulled an owl. A real, live, rather ruffled-looking owl. A long quill and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note which Harry could read upside down. "Dear Mr. Dumbledore, giving Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible. Hope you're well. Hagrid."
Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down, as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly.
"Where was I?"
said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Vernon, still ashen-faced from looking very angry, moved into the firelight.
"He's not going," he said.
Hagrid grunted.
"I'd like to see a great muggle like you stop him," he said.
"A what?" Harry said, interested.
"A muggle," said Hagrid. "It's what we call non-magic folk, like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up with a family of biggest muggles I've ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in we'd put a stop to this rubbish," said Uncle Vernon. "Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Wizard indeed."
"You knew," said Harry. "You knew I'm a wizard." "Knew?" shrieked Aunt Petunia suddenly. "Knew? Of course we knew. How could you not be, my dratted sister being what she was? Oh, she got a letter just like that, and disappeared after that school, and came home every holiday with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak. But for my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family." She stopped to draw a deep breath and then went ranting on. It seemed that she'd been waiting to say this for years.
Then she met that Potter at school, and they left and got married and had you. Of course, I knew you'd be just the same, just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up, and we got landed with you." Harry had gone very white. As soon as he'd found his voice, he said, "Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash." "Car crash?" roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back into their corner. "How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry Potter not knowing his own story when every kid in our world knows his name." "But why? What happened?" Harry asked urgently. The anger faded down from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. "I never expected this," he said in a low, worried voice. "I had no idea. When Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting hold of you, how much you didn't know. Oh, Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but someone's got to... I can't go off to Hogwarts not knowing." He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. "Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it." He sat down, stared into the fire for a few seconds, then said, "It begins, I suppose, with a person called... but it's incredible. You don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows." "Who?" "Well, I don't like saying it, the name, if I can help it. No one does." "Why not?" "Gulp and gargoyles, Harry. People are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad. As bad as you could go. Worse than worse. His name was..." Hagrid gulped, but no words came out. "Could you write it down?" Harry suggested. "Nah, can't spell it." "All right. Voldemort." Hagrid shuddered. "Don't make me say it again. Anyway, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. Got 'em too. Some were afraid, some just wanted a bit of his power, 'cause he was getting himself power. All right. Dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taken over. Course, some stood up to him, and he killed 'em. Horribly. Only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try taking the school, not just then anyway. Now, your mum and dad were as good a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Ed boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you know who never tried to get 'em on his side before. Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore to want anything to do with the dark side. So maybe he thought he could persuade 'em. Maybe he just wanted 'em out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you was all living on Halloween 10 years ago. You just a year old. He came to your house and... Hagrid suddenly pulled out a very dirty, spotted handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. "Sorry," he said, "but it's that sad. Knew your mum and dad, and nicer people you never couldn't find. Anyway, you know who killed him. And this is a real mystery of the thing. He tried killing you too. Wanted to make a clean job of it, I suppose. Or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That's no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful evil curse touches you. Took care of your mum and dad and your house, even. But it didn't work on you. And that's why you're famous, Harry. No one ever lived after he decided to kill them. No one except you. And he killed some of the best wizards and witches and wizards of the age. The McKintons, the Bones, the Pruitts. And you was only a baby, and you lived." Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw again the blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he had ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else. For the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. "Took ye from the ruined house meself, on Dumbledore's orders. Brought ye to this lot." "Load of tosh," said Uncle Vernon. Harry jumped. He had almost forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Vernon certainly seemed to have got back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid, and his fists were clenched. "Now you listen here, boy," he snarled. "I accept there's something strange about you. Probably nothing a good beating wouldn't have cured. And as for all this about your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denying it, and the world's better off without them, in my opinion. As for all they got getting mixed up with those wizarding types, just what I expected. Always knew they'd come to a sticky end, but at that moment, Hagrid leapt from the sofa, drew a battered pink umbrella from the inside of his coat, and pointed this at Uncle Vernon like a sword. He said, "I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you. One more word." In danger of being speared on the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. "That's better," said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had questions to ask. Hundreds of them. "But what happened to you know who?" "Good question, Harry. Disappeared. Vanished. Same night he tried to kill you. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, see? He was getting more and more powerful. Why'd he go? Some say he died. Cogswallop, in my opinion. Dunno if he had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time, like. But I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of 'em came out of kind of trances. Don't reckon they could have done if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere but lost his powers. Too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night he hadn't counted on. I dunno what it was. No one does. But something about you stumped him, all right." Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes. But Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. A wizard? Him? How could he possibly be? He'd spent his life being clouded by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. If he was really a wizard, why hadn't they been turned into warty toads every time they tried to lock him in his cupboard? If he'd once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world, how come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? "Hagrid," he said quietly, "I think you might have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard." To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. "Not a wizard, eh? Never make things happen when you were scared or angry?" Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about it. Every odd thing that had ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him had happened when he, Harry, had been upset or angry. Chased by Dudley's gang, he somehow found himself out of their reach. Dreading to go to school with that ridiculous haircut, he'd managed to make it grow back. And the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't he got his revenge without even realizing he was doing it? Hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. "See?" said Hagrid. "Harry Potter, not a wizard. You wait. You'll be right famous at Hogwarts." But Uncle Vernon wasn't going to give in without a fight. "Haven't I told you he's not going?" he hissed. "He's going to Stonewall High, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read those letters, and he needs all sorts of rubbish. Spell books and wands, and if he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him," growled Hagrid. "Stop Lily and James Potter's son From going to Hogwarts? You're mad. His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world. 7 years there and he won't know himself. He'll be with the youngsters of his own sort for a change, and he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts has ever had, Albus Dumbledore. I'm not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks, yelled Uncle Vernon. But he had finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella and whirled it over his head. Never, he thundered, insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me. He brought the umbrella swishing down through the air to point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and next second Dudley was dancing on the spot with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back on them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through the hole of his trousers. Uncle Vernon and Aunt roared, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room. He cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind them. Hagrid looked down his umbrella and stroked his beard. Shouldn't have lost me temper, he said ruefully, but it didn't work anyway. Meant to turn him into a pig. But I suppose he was too much like a pig anyway. There wasn't much left to do. He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows. Be grateful if you didn't mention that to anyone at Hogwarts, he said. I'm not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. He was allowed to do a bit. I get allowed to do a bit to follow you and get your letters and stuff. Oh, the reasons I was seen keen to take their job. Why aren't you supposed to do magic? Asked Harry. Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but I got expelled. To tell you the truth, in half and everything. But Dumbledore let me stay on as gamekeeper. Great man, Dumbledore. Why were you expelled? It's getting late, and we've got lots to do tomorrow, said Hagrid loudly. Gotta get up, enter town. Get all your books and that. He took off his thick black coat and threw it to Harry. You can kip under that. Don't mind if it wriggles a bit. I think I still got a couple of dormice in one of the pockets. There's their house on the hill.
We learned a lot in that chapter, the Keeper of the Keys. So, what I would like to do now is some discussion. Our questions today. First, how are we reintroduced to Hagrid in this chapter? He pounds the door down, doesn't he? And then he puts it back up. I always thought that was pretty funny. But he comes in the middle of this storm. And what are some of his identifying qualities? So what are some ways that the author described him? He is huge. I particularly enjoy that picture on the first page of this chapter where, I don't know if you can see it pretty well, there we go, where Hagrid, you see at the top, his head is touching the ceiling. That's the light bulb on the ceiling. He is so tall that he takes up almost the entire hut, right? And then he sits down on that couch and it kind of bends beneath him, doesn't it? He's very big. And they talked about how he had very kind eyes, though, right? He has lots of bushy hair, but kind eyes. What does Hagrid reveal to Harry about his real identity? One of my favorite lines from the movie, "You're a wizard, Harry." So he's a wizard. Harry has had all of these weird things happen to him, right, in his life. That glass vanished. His hair regrew when he was upset about his haircut. Just funny little things his whole life, and you could never explain them. Well, now they can. He's a wizard and he has magic. But there are some other things that Hagrid revealed about his family too, right? So how does Harry think that his parents passed away? What did his aunt and uncle tell him? They died in a car crash, right? Hagrid was so upset about that. They did not die in a car crash. They died fighting a very evil and powerful wizard. And Harry learns that that wizard also tried to kill him and gave him his lightning scar. So we also learned something at the end here about Hagrid. Hold on, let me get to the picture. When he's a little upset because Uncle Vernon was not nice about Hogwarts, was he? He said he's not going to pay for Harry to go to some silly school. Well, Hagrid really loves that school. I mean, he lives there. And he really respects Albus Dumbledore. And so after Uncle Vernon disrespected him, he was not happy. So he gets his pink umbrella out and he shoots it at Dudley. And he gets a little piggy tail. Can you see the little piggy tail? But Hagrid tells Harry something, doesn't he? He says, "Could you not tell anyone that I did that?" Because, why? You remember? Hagrid was actually expelled, which means he was kicked out of school from Hogwarts. We don't learn why, but what they do is they snap their wand in half. So he isn't technically supposed to be doing magic. All right, our chapter title was Keeper of the Keys. So we learn, speaking of titles, how does Hagrid introduce himself? What's his first name? Hagrid's actually his last name. Rubeus Hagrid. And then he introduces himself, Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts. So what is a Keeper of the Keys? Or if you don't know, what do you think it is? So Keeper of Keys and Grounds, it kind of just means that he looks over all of the outside of Hogwarts. And Keeper of the Keys means he has the gate keys and all of the things to go in and out. So why do you think that she named this chapter Keeper of the Keys? Well, we get to learn, first off, more about Hogwarts, right? And then also more about our friend Hagrid and why he is so involved at Hogwarts and enjoys it there and works there, what he does. So we learn about the Keeper of the Keys, and he comes and brings Harry his letter. Now, next time, it is a very long chapter, so I think we are going to split chapter 5 into 2 parts, okay? So, I will hopefully see you next time, and I hope you enjoyed chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and we will see you with the next one. Bye, everyone!